The gun went off while she was still holding his phone. The sound did not feel real at first. It felt like something added in post-production, like a cheap effect laid over a quiet room that had not asked for violence. Elena stared at Daniel across the kitchen island as the glass behind him exploded into a bloom of cracks, and his body jerked backward with a delayed, almost theatrical surprise. The mug in his hand shattered on the tile, coffee bleeding across the floor like something rehearsed too many times to still shock anyone. For a second, she thought he was acting, because Daniel had always been good at staging reactions, good at turning small arguments into operas. Then she saw the blood spreading under his shoulder. Her hand tightened around his phone. The screen was still lit. A message sat open, half-typed. "I can't keep lying to her." The cursor blinked like it was waiting for applause. "Call an ambulance," Daniel said, but the words were thin and strangely calm, as if he were reminding her to buy milk. He pressed his hand against the wound and winced, but his eyes were not panicked. They were searching her face. "Elena, now." She did not move. She felt something inside her separate, like a seam giving way. The message on the screen pulsed in her vision, the unfinished confession glowing brighter than the blood. "Who were you lying to?" she asked, and her voice sounded steady, which frightened her more than the gunshot. "Not now," he said, and he tried to stand but slipped on the coffee and nearly fell. The blood smeared across the counter as he caught himself. "Please, just call." She looked toward the shattered window. No second shot came, no footsteps outside, just the hum of the refrigerator and the faint hiss of wind sneaking through the broken glass. It did not look like a random shooting. It looked like a frame. "You staged this," she said quietly. He stared at her as if she had spoken in another language. "Are you insane? I'm bleeding." "You're bleeding in the shoulder," she replied. "Not the chest, not the neck." And the bullet came through at an angle that doesn't match the street. She hated that she noticed these things. She hated that her brain, instead of collapsing, was calculating. He laughed, a short, disbelieving sound that broke into a groan. "You think I shot myself through a window? I think you're capable of worse," she said, and she finally reached for her own phone. Her fingers hovered over the screen. If she called, everything would become public. Police, questions, reports. If she didn't call, he might die. If he died, the message would still exist. He watched her with something like relief when she began dialing. "Thank you," he whispered, as if she had just forgiven him. She wondered if that was what he thought this was. The ambulance came too fast. That was the first detail that would not leave her. She had barely hung up when the sirens were already turning into their street. The paramedics moved with efficient detachment. Asking her questions, she answered automatically while watching Daniel's face. He looked pale, but not afraid. He kept glancing at her, as if trying to read whether she would play her role correctly. "What happened?" one of them asked. "There was a shot through the window," she said. "I don't know who did it." Daniel's eyes flickered at the word, "don't." At the hospital, she sat under fluorescent lights that made everyone look guilty. A police officer took her statement while a nurse pressed gauze into Daniel's shoulder behind a curtain. The officer's pen moved steadily across his pad. "Any enemies?" he asked. She thought about the message. "He's a consultant," she said. "Corporate disputes. High stakes." It was not a lie. It was just incomplete. The officer nodded. "And your relationship?" She hesitated. "We're engaged." Daniel's voice drifted through the curtain. "Tell him we're happy," he called weakly, as if it were a joke. The officer's eyebrow lifted. "Are you?" She looked at the thin hospital wall separating them. She thought about the nights Daniel came home late and kissed her forehead instead of her mouth. She thought about the way he had started locking his phone, something he never used to do. She thought about the message. "I can't keep lying to her." "We were," she said. When they finally let her see him, he looked smaller in the bed, the bravado drained by antiseptic and white sheets. The bullet had passed cleanly through muscle. No major damage. A miracle, they said. He would recover. He reached for her hand as soon as she came close. His grip was firm, not weak at all. "You have to trust me," he said, skipping apology, skipping explanation. "Trust you about what?" she asked. "That I didn't do this," he replied. "That someone is trying to scare us." "Us." The word felt heavy. "Why would someone scare us?" "Because of my work," he said quickly. "Because of the deals I've been closing. There are people who lose millions when I win." "And the message?" she asked. His hand tightened. "What message?" She held his gaze. "The one on your phone." He looked away first. "You shouldn't have been reading my phone. You shouldn't have been writing it." He swallowed. For the first time, something like fear flickered in his eyes, but it was not fear of the shooter. It was fear of her knowing too much. "It wasn't what you think." "Then tell me what I think." He sighed, as if she were exhausting. I was talking to a client. I was going to expose something. I can't keep lying to her. Meant I can't keep lying to the CEO. It's not about you. Then why didn't you say that immediately? Because I'm in a hospital bed, Elena, he snapped, then softened his tone. Because I'm trying to survive. She wanted to believe him. That was the cruelest part. She wanted to accept the simplest narrative. Successful man targeted by unseen enemies. Loyal fiancé standing by his side. It would be clean. It would be dignified. Instead, she heard herself ask, "Did you aim for your shoulder?" His expression hardened. "You think I would shoot myself to test you? I think you would do almost anything to control a story," she said. He stared at her for a long moment, and then he smiled. It was the same smile he used in negotiations, the one that promised cooperation while calculating leverage. "If I wanted to test you," he said quietly, "I wouldn't risk a bullet. I would risk your reputation." The threat settled between them like a third presence. When he was discharged 2 days later, reporters were already outside the hospital. The shooting had become news. A rising corporate strategist attacked in his own home. Possible retaliation. The narrative had begun building itself without her permission. Daniel squeezed her hand as cameras flashed. "Stay close," he murmured. "We need to look united." She felt the weight of the word need. Not want, not love, need. At home, the kitchen window had been boarded up. The police had taken the bullet from the wall. There were no witnesses, no clear angle from the street cameras. It was as if the shooter had known exactly where to stand. Daniel moved carefully, but he insisted on walking without help. "I don't want them thinking I'm weak," he said. "Who?" she asked. "Everyone," he replied. That night, she lay awake, listening to his breathing. He slept on his back, one arm across his chest like a fallen soldier. She watched the rise and fall of his ribs and wondered how much of it was performance. She thought about the message again, about the half-confession suspended in digital limbo. In the early hours, his phone vibrated on the nightstand. She froze. He did not stir. The screen lit up the dark room. A name she did not recognize appeared. Mata. Her stomach tightened. She told herself not to look. She told herself she was better than this. Then she reached for the phone. The message preview was short. "Did you do it?" Her heart began to pound, not with surprise but with confirmation. She unlocked the phone using the code she had memorized months ago when he first changed it. He thought she didn't know. He thought she didn't notice the way his thumb shielded the screen. The conversation thread opened. Earlier messages scrolled upward. A history she had not known existed. "She's getting suspicious. We need to accelerate. It has to look real." Her hands trembled. "Accelerate what? Look real how?" She heard Daniel's breathing shift. She locked the phone and placed it back, just as he rolled slightly toward her. His eyes opened halfway. "What time is it?" he murmured. "Late," she said. He studied her face in the dim light. "You're shaking." "I'm cold." He reached for her, pulling her closer with his uninjured arm. "It's almost over," he whispered against her hair. The words sounded like comfort. They felt like a verdict. The next morning, she made coffee, while Daniel took a call in his office. His voice carried through the thin walls, lower than usual. She caught fragments. "Media sympathy. Temporary setback. We'll pivot. Pivot." As if the bullet were a marketing strategy. Her phone buzzed. A private number. She hesitated before answering. "Hello?" Silence at first. Then a woman's voice, steady and controlled. "You read it, didn't you?" Elena's grip tightened around the mug. "Who is this?" "You know who it is." "Mara. What do you want?" Elena asked. "I want to know if you're going to ruin everything," Mara replied. "Everything." The word echoed. "He shot himself," Elena said quietly. There was a pause on the line. Not shock. Not denial. Calculation. "He wouldn't risk that without reason," Mara said. "So there is a reason." "You're smarter than he gives you credit for," Mara replied, "but not smart enough to understand the scale." "The scale of what?" "The merger," Mara said. "The investigation. The charges that are about to surface." Daniel needed leverage, sympathy. He needed to look like a victim before the story broke. Elena felt the room tilt. "What charges?" "You really don't know," Mara said, and for the first time there was something like pity in her voice. "He's been manipulating accounts for months, diverting funds, setting up fall guys. When it explodes, he wanted to already be the man who survived an assassination attempt." Elena closed her eyes. The pieces aligned too easily. "And you?" she asked. "What are you in this?" "I was the one he couldn't keep lying to," Mara said. "I'm the internal auditor." The kitchen clock ticked loudly. Daniel's voice continued in the office, confident, measured. Elena imagined walking in and confronting him. Imagined throwing the phone at his face. Imagined calling the police again and giving them the real story. If she did, he would fall. But he would not fall alone. You're engaged to him, Mara said softly. When this becomes public, you'll be dragged into it. Your name, your finances, your job. You think I care about that? I think you care about surviving, Mara replied. And right now, the safest place for you is next to him. The cruelty of it stole Elena's breath. Stay close to the man who staged his own shooting to manipulate public opinion. Stay close to the man who might be committing fraud on a scale she could barely imagine. Stay close, because distance would make her suspicious. You called me, Elena said slowly. Why? Because I need to know if you're going to turn on him too early, Mara answered. If you do, he'll burn everything, including you. Daniel's office door opened. His footsteps approached the kitchen. Elena turned her back to the doorway. What do you want from me? She whispered. I want you to keep playing your role, Mara said, until I have enough evidence to bring him down cleanly. Daniel wrapped his arm around Elena's waist from behind. She flinched. Who are you talking to? He asked lightly. She forced her voice to steady. Telemarketer. Mara remained silent on the line, listening. Daniel kissed Elena's temple. Tell them we're not interested, he said, and his eyes searched her face again, always searching. I'm not interested, she said into the phone, and she did not know which one of them she was speaking to. After she hung up, Daniel turned her gently to face him. You look pale, he said. Are you worried? Yes, she replied. About me? She held his gaze. About us. He smiled again, the negotiation smile. We'll be fine, I promise. She wondered if promises counted as lies when the speaker no longer distinguished between them. That evening, news broke of a pending federal inquiry into Daniel's firm. Anonymous sources, suspicious transactions. The story framed him as a potential whistleblower turned target. The shooting reappeared in every headline, contextualized as possible retaliation. Elena watched it unfold on television while Daniel fielded calls in the other room. The narrative was working. Sympathy poured in online. Colleagues expressed outrage. Investors declared support. He emerged from the office looking almost triumphant. See, he said, they're already connecting the dots the right way. The right way for who? She asked. For us, he replied automatically. There it was again. Us as shield. Us as brand. She thought about Mara's warning. If she exposed him now, he would claim she was unstable, traumatized by the shooting. He would release selective messages, imply jealousy. He would make her the unreliable narrator of her own life. He sat beside her on the couch. I need you to do something, he said. Her stomach dropped. What? There's going to be a press conference tomorrow. I want you there. At my side. It has to look solid. And if I say no? He studied her quietly. Then people will ask why. And what will you tell them? He did not answer immediately. He did not need to. The threat from the hospital returned in memory. I would risk your reputation. I don't want to hurt you, he said finally. But I will protect myself. The honesty was almost refreshing. She nodded slowly. I'll be there. He leaned back, satisfied. Good. In the silence that followed, she felt the shape of a choice forming. Not a clean choice. Not a heroic one. If she helped Mara gather evidence, she would be complicit in deception for weeks, maybe months. If she stayed loyal to Daniel, she would become part of whatever crime he was orchestrating. Saving herself might destroy him. Saving him would destroy her. She looked at the boarded window, at the temporary barrier covering the wound in their home. It would be replaced with clean glass soon, clear and invisible. The crack would disappear from sight, but not from memory. Daniel reached for her hand again. We're in this together, he said softly. She squeezed back, matching his pressure exactly. Yes, she replied. But in her mind, she was already calculating angles, trajectories, and how many more bullets, metaphorical or otherwise, would have to be fired before the truth tore through both of them. The press conference was scheduled for noon, which meant the morning belonged to performance. Daniel stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie with slow, deliberate movements, his injured shoulder wrapped beneath a tailored suit that concealed the bandage without hiding the narrative. He looked strong enough to inspire confidence and wounded enough to justify sympathy. Elena watched from the doorway, noticing how he practiced expressions the way actors rehearse grief. Stand slightly behind me, he instructed without turning around. Close enough to touch. Not so close that it looks desperate. She folded her arms. You've thought about this. I think about everything, he replied. That's why we're still standing. We. The word pressed against her skull again. She walked closer, studying his reflection. Did you hesitate? She asked quietly. About what? Pulling the trigger. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "You're still on that?" "I'm still on the truth." He turned to face her fully. "The truth is irrelevant if nobody believes it. What matters is which version survives. And which version survives if I decide to speak." He stepped closer until their bodies nearly touched. His voice lowered. "Then, I speak louder." The elevator ride down to the lobby felt like descending into a courtroom without a judge. Cameras waited outside the building, reporters already shouting questions before the doors even opened. Daniel straightened his shoulders, pain flickering across his face but never overtaking the script he had memorized. Elena slipped her hand into his as rehearsed, aware of how easily she could pull away, and how catastrophic that gesture would be. Flashbulbs erupted the moment they stepped into view. "Daniel, do you believe the shooting is connected to the investigation? Are you cooperating with federal authorities? Is your fiancé safe?" Daniel raised a calm hand. "My priority is protecting the people I love," he began, voice steady and resonant. "Recent events have been deeply unsettling, but I remain committed to transparency and accountability." Transparency. The word hovered like smoke. Elena felt dozens of eyes, scanning her face for cracks. She forced her expression into something between concern and resolve. She wondered how many of them could tell she was acting too. One reporter shouted, "Did you have prior knowledge of the inquiry before the shooting?" Daniel paused just long enough to appear thoughtful. "I have always believed in ethical practice. If there are questions, I welcome them." It was a non-answer delivered with confidence, which made it effective. Another voice cut through the noise. "Miss Alvarez, do you believe this was targeted?" Elena felt the ground shift under her. Daniel's grip tightened slightly, a warning disguised as affection. She stepped half a pace forward. "I believe my fiancé deserves due process," she said carefully. "And I believe violence is never the answer." She did not say whether she believed the violence was real. After the conference, Daniel exhaled like a man finishing a marathon. "You did well," he said, as they retreated into the building. "You sounded loyal." "I am loyal," she replied, and she let the ambiguity hang. In the car ride home, silence thickened between them. The driver kept his eyes forward, pretending not to hear anything beyond traffic. Daniel scrolled through his phone, reading reactions online. "Public sentiment is shifting," he muttered. "They're painting me as a whistleblower." "Are you?" she asked. He did not look up. "Does it matter?" "Yes." He locked the screen and met her gaze. "It matters that we stay ahead. That's all." That night, Mara sent another message. This time not a call, but a file. A spreadsheet attachment with highlighted transactions and annotations in the margins. Elena opened it in the bathroom with the shower running to mask the glow of her phone. The numbers blurred at first, but the pattern emerged quickly. Funds rerouted through shell accounts. Signatures altered. Dates overlapping with board meetings Daniel had attended. At the bottom of the file was a single line from Mara. "He'll sacrifice anyone." Elena leaned against the sink, breath shallow. She imagined Daniel discovering this exchange. She imagined him smiling, while deleting evidence, while reshaping reality around her denial. When she returned to the bedroom, he was sitting upright, watching her. "You were gone a while," he said. "I showered," she replied. "Without getting your hair wet?" Her pulse spiked. "I changed my mind." He studied her face for longer than comfortable. "You're different," he said quietly. "Maybe I'm just paying attention." He lay back slowly. "Be careful with that." The next week unraveled with calculated chaos. Federal agents arrived at the office, seizing documents and hard drives. Cameras captured Daniel walking through a corridor of questions, his arm still in a sling, his expression a mixture of wounded indignation and dignified patience. Elena watched from home as commentators debated his guilt in split screens. Mara called again. "The board is panicking," she said. "He's positioning himself as the victim of internal sabotage." "He told me he welcomed questions," Elena replied. "He welcomes questions he controls." "What do you need from me?" Elena asked, the words tasting like betrayal. "I need access," Mara said. "His home computer, his private server backups. He doesn't trust the office network." Elena's chest tightened. "You want me to steal from him? I want you to prevent him from destroying evidence. And if he finds out?" "He won't," Mara said. But her certainty felt rehearsed. That night, while Daniel attended a late meeting with his attorneys, Elena entered his study. The room smelled faintly of leather and ambition. She sat at his desk, fingers hovering over the keyboard. The password field blinked expectantly. She tried combinations she knew, birthdays, anniversaries. Nothing worked. Then she paused. What would Daniel choose? Not sentiment, not nostalgia, control. She typed her own name, followed by a string of numbers she recognized from a past argument about percentages and profit margins. The screen unlocked. Her stomach dropped. Folders filled the desktop, labeled with project codes. She navigated quickly, copying files onto a hidden drive Mara had instructed her to prepare. Each progress bar felt like a countdown. She imagined Daniel's car pulling into the driveway at any second, his footsteps approaching, his voice calm and deadly. As the final file transferred, she noticed another folder, contingency. Her curiosity overrode caution. She opened it. Inside were documents detailing asset reallocations in case of indictment, offshore accounts, property transfers, a draft statement accusing an unnamed partner of embezzlement. Her name appeared in the document. She stared at it, unable to breathe. The statement framed her as financially unstable, overwhelmed by wedding expenses, secretly siphoning funds. It included fabricated emails, manipulated timestamps. He had built an escape route using her as the exit. The garage door rumbled. She slammed the folder closed and ejected the drive, slipping it into her pocket just as Daniel's footsteps echoed in the hallway. He entered the study without knocking. "What are you doing?" She turned slowly. "Looking for a book. In the dark?" "I didn't want to disturb anything." He walked closer, eyes scanning the desk. "You know I don't like people in here." "I'm not people," she said. He stopped inches from her. "Not yet." The implication settled heavily. Not yet expendable. Not yet framed. He reached past her to tap the keyboard, as if checking whether it had been used. "You're tense," he observed. "You wrote a contingency plan," she said before she could stop herself. His expression did not change. "Of course I did. Any rational person would. Including one where I'm the scapegoat?" He smiled faintly. "That was hypothetical. My name was in it." "Because you're closest to me," he replied, "which makes it believable." The cruelty was clinical. "You would destroy me," she whispered. "If it meant surviving," he said, and there was no apology in his tone. "Yes." The honesty hit harder than the gunshot. She stepped back, creating space. "Then why keep me at all?" He tilted his head. "Because right now, you're more valuable beside me than beneath me." The words felt like a sentence pronounced without appeal. After he left the room, she locked herself in the bathroom and texted Mara a single line. "He has a plan to blame me." The response came quickly. "Then we move faster." 32,000. The following days became a race disguised as normalcy. Elena smiled at interviews, stood beside Daniel at charity events meant to reinforce his image, and secretly funneled data to Mara through encrypted channels. Each act of loyalty in public was an act of sabotage in private. The pressure mounted. Daniel grew sharper, more observant. "You check your phone a lot," he remarked one evening. "So do you," she countered. He studied her again. "Are you afraid of me?" She considered lying. "I'm afraid of what you're capable of." He nodded slowly, almost approvingly. "Good." The investigation tightened around him. Subpoenas arrived. Bank accounts were scrutinized. Anonymous leaks hinted at internal evidence mounting against him. Daniel responded with controlled outrage, accusing rivals of orchestrating a smear campaign. One night, he poured 2 glasses of wine and handed one to her. "If this collapses," he said, "we leave the country." Her grip faltered. "We?" "Yes. I've arranged it." "You arranged it without asking me. I assumed you'd prefer exile to prison." The choice he offered was not a choice at all. "And if I don't go?" she asked. He sipped his wine calmly. "Then you'll be here when they start asking who else knew." The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. Complicity was contagious. She looked at him across the dimly lit dining room, remembering the first time he had taken her hand years ago, promising partnership and ambition. She wondered when partnership had shifted into leverage. "I won't run," she said quietly. He set his glass down. "Then you'd better pray I don't fall." The words lingered long after he left the table. 2 days later, agents arrived at their home with a warrant. Daniel remained composed, even helpful, guiding them through rooms as if hosting a tour. Elena stood aside, heart pounding, aware that the hidden drive was no longer in the house. Mara had already secured copies. An agent approached her. "Did you have access to his financial accounts?" She felt Daniel's gaze from across the room. "Limited," she answered truthfully. "Were you aware of any irregularities?" She hesitated. Every second stretched into consequence. If she spoke now, the explosion would be immediate. If she stayed silent, she bought Mara more time and risked deeper entanglement. "I trusted him," she said finally. The agent nodded, making a note. Daniel watched her carefully, measuring whether she had stepped out of line. When the agents left, he closed the door slowly. "You did well," he said again. "I didn't lie," she replied. "Neither did I," he said, and the statement felt like a joke neither of them laughed at. That night, Mara called with urgency in her voice. The board has scheduled an emergency vote, she said. If we release the evidence tomorrow, he'll be indicted within days. Elena felt a strange mix of relief and dread. And me? You'll testify, Mara replied, as a cooperating witness. The word witness cut deeply. Not fiancé, not partner. Witness. Once this starts, Mara continued, there's no going back. There was never going back, Elena said softly. She hung up and walked into the bedroom where Daniel sat reviewing documents. He looked up at her, eyes sharp but tired. What is it? He asked. She stood there, watching him, memorizing the lines of a man she had loved and feared in equal measure. She thought about the bullet, about the contingency plan, about the way he had already rehearsed her downfall. I need to ask you something, she said. He leaned back. Go ahead. If it came down to it, she asked slowly. Would you ever choose me over yourself? He did not hesitate. No. The clarity was brutal. She nodded once, absorbing the impact. Thank you for being honest. He frowned slightly. Why does that sound like goodbye? She offered a small, unreadable smile. It's not. But something inside her had already crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. The next morning, she woke before Daniel and lay still, listening to the measured rhythm of his breathing. It struck her how peaceful he looked when unconscious, stripped of calculation. In sleep, he did not negotiate. He did not threaten. He did not measure outcomes. He simply existed, vulnerable and unaware. And for a fleeting moment, she wondered whether she had imagined the colder version of him, the architect of contingency plans with her name in bold. Then she remembered the document. She slipped out of bed quietly and went to the kitchen, where the early light fell across the boarded window like a reminder of how easily glass breaks and how difficult it is to restore what has shattered. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A message from Mara. The board vote moved up. Today. Elena stared at the words. Today meant no more rehearsal, no more pretending she had time to decide. Today meant stepping into a narrative that would swallow both of them. Daniel entered the kitchen moments later, dressed already, his tie loosely knotted. You're up early, he observed. So are you, she replied. Big day, he said lightly, pouring coffee as if discussing a presentation. The board is meeting. They'll either stand with me or distance themselves. And if they distance themselves, he met her gaze over the rim of his cup. Then I become the story. You already are, he smiled faintly. Not in the way they'd prefer. She wanted to tell him everything. She wanted to lay the evidence on the table and watch his composure crack. Instead, she asked, do you ever get tired? Of what? Of constantly calculating. He considered that. Calculation is survival, he said finally. Emotion is luxury. And love? He did not answer immediately. Love is leverage, he said at last. The words settled heavily between them. Hours later, Daniel left for the board meeting. Elena remained behind, pacing the living room, replaying Mara's instructions. Once the board vote concluded, Mara would release the compiled evidence to federal authorities and select journalists. The goal was simultaneous impact, legal pressure, and public exposure. Her phone rang. It's happening, Mara said without greeting. They voted to suspend him pending investigation. He doesn't know yet. Elena's pulse quickened. When do you release it? In 30 minutes, Mara replied, after he exits the building. Elena imagined Daniel stepping out to cameras, expecting support, only to face accusation. The thought should have felt like justice. Instead, it felt like stepping into a hurricane. What if he has something we don't know about? Elena asked. Another contingency. He always does, Mara admitted. That's why we have to move before he does. Elena hung up and sat down heavily. The clock on the wall ticked with merciless precision. She checked the news feed compulsively. Still nothing. Then her phone vibrated again, this time with a notification from a financial news outlet. Breaking. Federal sources confirm criminal inquiry into Daniel Reyes. The article loaded with dizzying speed. Screenshots of transactions. Anonymous insider testimony. References to internal audits. Elena's chest tightened as she read phrases she recognized from Mara's file. Her phone rang immediately after. Daniel. She stared at his name on the screen before answering. Hello. They've suspended me, he said, voice clipped but controlled. And someone leaked documents. I saw, she replied, forcing steadiness. They're claiming internal cooperation, he continued. Someone close. The accusation was not yet direct, but it hovered. Do you know who? She asked. There was a pause. I'm narrowing it down. Her throat tightened. Daniel, I need you to listen carefully, he interrupted. Go to the safe in the study. Take the envelope labeled International. Put it in your bag, then meet me at the secondary apartment. The instructions came too quickly. Too prepared. You're running, she said. I'm repositioning, he corrected. This isn't over. And if I don't go, his voice lowered, then you'll be standing in the blast radius alone. The call ended before she could respond. She sat frozen, phone still pressed to her ear long after the line went dead. The study loomed in her mind like a test she could no longer postpone. She rose slowly and walked down the hall. The safe was hidden behind a framed photograph from their engagement trip. She entered the code he had once shown her, confident she would forget it. The door clicked open. Inside were passports, cash bundles, and the envelope marked International. She pulled it out and opened it. Plane tickets. Offshore account details. A new identity for her. Her name was different. Her birth date altered slightly. Her photograph embedded in a foreign driver's license. He had planned not just his escape, but hers. Or at least the version of her that suited his plan. Her phone vibrated again. A message from an unknown number. A single image attached. She opened it. It was a still frame from a security camera in the study, dated the night she had copied the files. Her silhouette was unmistakable. Her breath left her in a sharp exhale. Another message followed. You thought I didn't know? Daniel. The realization was surgical in its precision. He had allowed her access. He had watched her copy the files. He had known she was playing a role, and had let the role unfold. Her phone rang again. You disappoint me, he said when she answered. His voice was not angry. It was almost weary. You set me up, she whispered. I tested you, he corrected. You chose your side. You wrote a plan to blame me. I wrote many plans, he said calmly. Most of them never need to be used. You let me steal evidence. I let you believe you were ahead, he replied. Which tells me you're not thinking clearly. Her mind raced. If he had known about her cooperation, why hadn't he stopped her? Unless he needed the leak to happen. What did you leak? She demanded. He exhaled softly. Selective data. Enough to trigger investigation. Not enough to destroy me. Her stomach dropped. You used Mara. I used everyone, he said without hesitation. That's how you survive when the wolves circle. And me? You were the variable, he replied. Now you're the liability. The word struck harder than any accusation. What are you going to do? She asked. That depends, he said. Are you coming with me? The choice returned, sharper than before. Go with him and become complicit in flight. Stay and risk being framed. If I come, she said slowly. What happens to the charges? I manage them from a distance, he replied. Narratives can be reshaped. And if I stay? He was silent for a moment. Then I release the footage. The evidence of you accessing my files. The suggestion that you collaborated with internal auditors to sabotage me. You'd ruin me. I'd survive, he said. The simplicity of it was devastating. Elena closed the safe slowly. I need time, she said. You have an hour, he replied. After that, events will proceed without you. The line went dead again. She stood in the study, envelope in hand, staring at the security camera mounted discreetly in the corner. She had never noticed it before. Of course she hadn't. Daniel did not install anything without purpose. Her phone buzzed again, this time from Mara. He knows, she said immediately when Elena answered. I know, Elena replied. How bad? He has footage of me in his study. Mara swore softly. He'll claim you orchestrated the leak. He already has. There was a pause. Then you have to come in now, publicly, before he controls the narrative. If I do that, Elena said, he releases the footage. Then we contextualize it, Mara insisted. We show the contingency plan. We show he intended to frame you. He'll deny it. He denies everything. Elena pressed her free hand against her forehead, feeling the weight of converging timelines. If I run with him, I become his accomplice. And if you don't, you know the answer. Mara's voice softened slightly. He never planned to save you. I know. Then don't save him. The simplicity of that directive contrasted sharply with the complexity of the consequences. Elena walked back into the living room and sat on the couch, the envelope resting on her lap. The boarded window stared back at her, mute and accusatory. She imagined boarding a plane under a false name, disappearing into a country where no one knew her. She imagined living in constant awareness that her freedom depended on Daniel's stability. She also imagined standing before investigators, admitting her role in accessing his files, enduring public scrutiny, and potentially facing charges herself. Neither path offered safety, only different forms of damage. Her phone vibrated again. A news alert. Daniel Reyes leaves board meeting amid escalating probe. She opened the live feed. Daniel emerged from the building, face composed but eyes sharp. Reporters shouted questions about suspension and criminal exposure. He raised his hand for silence. I have always cooperated fully, he began. Recent leaks are the result of internal betrayal. Internal betrayal. Elena's heart pounded as she watched him shape the narrative in real time. I trusted those closest to me, he continued, voice carrying. I now see that trust was misplaced. Her breath caught. Was he going to name her? He paused deliberately. However, I remain confident that the truth will clear my name. He stepped away from the microphones without specifying further. Her phone rang. I gave you a chance, Daniel said. You gave me a trap, she replied. You chose it. You set it. Silence stretched between them. Elena, he said finally, and there was something almost human in his tone now, something that sounded less like strategy and more like plea. Come with me, we can reset, start somewhere clean. Nothing about this is clean, she whispered. We can make it look that way. I don't want it to look clean, she said. I want it to be clean. He exhaled sharply. Idealism is expensive. So is betrayal. He was quiet for a moment. If you stay, he said slowly, I won't protect you. You never did, she replied. Another pause, longer this time. You think you're righteous, he said. You think turning on me absolves you. I'm not absolved, she said. I'm implicated. Then why choose the losing side? Because at least it's not built on lies. He laughed softly. Everything is built on lies. The only difference is who controls them. The conversation circled the same axis of power and perception, neither of them conceding ground. Finally, he spoke again, voice colder. This is your last chance. She looked at the envelope one final time, then at the boarded window, then at her own reflection in the darkened television screen. I'm not coming, she said. There was no immediate response. Then a quiet acknowledgement. Understood. The line disconnected. Within minutes, her phone exploded with notifications. A video clip surfaced online, grainy security footage of her in the study, accessing Daniel's computer. Headlines followed quickly. Fiancé implicated in data leak. Was internal sabotage personal? The narrative shifted with ruthless efficiency. Mara called again, voice urgent. He released it. I know. You need to come in now. I'm on my way. She grabbed her coat and left the house without looking back. Cameras had already begun to gather outside, drawn by the escalating drama. As she stepped into the street, microphones thrust toward her. Miss Alvarez, did you access Mr. Ray's private files? Were you collaborating with internal auditors? Did you leak confidential data? She stopped walking. For a moment, she considered pushing through silently. Then she turned to face them. Yes, she said clearly. I accessed his files. A murmur rippled through the crowd. And why? A reporter pressed. Because he was preparing to frame me, she replied. Flashbulbs exploded again. Behind the cameras, she could almost feel Daniel's gaze. Even though he was nowhere in sight, the war had shifted from private to public, and there would be no more controlled environments, no more rehearsed conferences. She did not know who would survive this escalation. She only knew that the line she had crossed would not allow retreat. The questions came faster after that admission, layered and aggressive, but she stopped answering. One confession was enough to fracture the illusion. Anything more would be ammunition. She pushed through the crowd and into the waiting car Mara had sent, her pulse hammering against her throat as the door slammed shut behind her. Mara was already inside. For a second, they simply looked at each other, two women bound by a man who had underestimated both of them. Mara's expression was not triumphant. It was wary. You went public, Mara said. So did he, Elena replied. Mara nodded once. You realize he'll escalate. He already has. The car pulled away from the house, cameras shrinking in the rearview mirror. Elena watched the boarded window disappear from view and felt a strange, hollow detachment, as if she were leaving behind not just a home, but a version of herself that had believed stability could be negotiated. At the federal building, the air felt colder. Elena followed Mara through security and into a conference room, where two agents waited with files already open. They did not offer comfort. They offered chairs. You understand that by admitting access to his private systems, you're implicating yourself, one agent said without preamble. I understand, Elena replied. Were you instructed by Mr. Reyes to access those files? No. Did you copy data? Yes. For what purpose? She hesitated. Not because she lacked an answer, but because every word would bind her to a permanent record. To verify whether he intended to frame me, she said finally. The agents exchanged a glance. Do you have evidence of that intention? Mara slid a folder across the table. Contingency documents, she said. Draft statements. Fabricated correspondence. The agent opened the folder and scanned quickly. His expression shifted slightly. These are serious allegations. They're serious actions, Elena corrected. The questioning lasted hours, every timeline dissected, every message contextualized. Elena recounted the night of the shooting, the hospital conversation, the contingency folder, the security footage. She did not dramatize. She did not editorialize. She stuck to fact, even when the facts made her look complicit. When it ended, the agents informed her she was not under arrest, but the investigation remained ongoing. The phrase offered no reassurance. Outside the building, reporters were already waiting again. This time she did not stop. Back in the car, Mara exhaled. "You just detonated his narrative," she said. "He'll build another." "Maybe," Mara admitted. "But it'll be harder." Elena stared at her hands, noticing how steady they were now. The panic had passed. What remained was a dull, focused awareness. "Where is he?" she asked. "Secondary apartment," Mara said. "For now." As if summoned by the mention, Elena's phone vibrated. "Daniel." She considered ignoring it. Then she answered. "You look confident on camera," he said, without greeting. "So do you," she replied. "You think you've cornered me." "I think I stopped pretending." He was silent for a moment. She could hear traffic in the background, maybe whined through an open window. "You humiliated me," he said finally. "You prepared to destroy me." That was theoretical. It was written. Another pause. "Do you know what happens now?" he asked. "You tell me. You become the unreliable partner who accessed private data without consent. You become the emotionally unstable fiancé seeking revenge. Is that the script? It's a compelling one." She closed her eyes briefly. "You're going to destroy everything to avoid losing." "I don't lose," he said calmly. "I adapt." "And if adaptation means prison?" He did not answer immediately. "It won't." The certainty in his tone unsettled her more than anger would have. "Daniel," she said, and her voice softened despite herself. "You can still stop this. You can cooperate." "I am cooperating," he replied. "With myself." The call ended. Mara watched her closely. "He's not folding," she observed. "He never does," Elena said. The next 48 hours blurred into a storm of statements and counterstatements. Daniel's legal team released documents suggesting Elena had acted independently, motivated by financial stress and jealousy. Old photos surfaced online, framed to imply instability. Anonymous sources hinted at tension in the engagement long before the shooting. Elena's inbox filled with messages, some supportive, many accusatory. Strangers debated her integrity as if it were a public commodity. Mara remained in constant contact, coordinating with investigators, preparing affidavits. "He's shifting assets," she said one evening, "trying to secure liquidity before potential freezes. Can they stop him?" "They're trying." Elena sat in a borrowed apartment Mara had arranged, the curtains drawn despite the late hour. She felt like a ghost in her own life, watching events unfold at a speed she could barely process. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a notification from a news alert. New evidence raises questions about shooting incident. She opened the article with trembling fingers. Forensic analysts had re-examined the trajectory of the bullet, citing inconsistencies with an external shooter. The piece stopped short of accusation, but suggested the possibility of staging. Her breath caught. Mara called within seconds. "We didn't leak that," she said. "Then who did?" "I don't know." The implication hung between them. If Mara had not leaked it, and Elena had not, then Daniel had. "Why would he undermine his own victim narrative?" Elena asked. "To pivot," Mara said slowly. "To control the revelation before someone else does." On television, Daniel appeared again, this time addressing the shooting directly. "I have recently become aware of forensic interpretations suggesting irregularities," he said gravely. "If mistakes were made in the initial investigation, I welcome a full review." Elena stared at the screen in disbelief. "He's reframing," Mara whispered. "He's turning potential exposure into proactive transparency." As if on cue, Daniel continued. "I have nothing to hide." Elena felt something twist inside her. He was stepping ahead of the accusation, positioning himself as cooperative in uncovering even his own potential wrongdoing. It was a strategy that neutralized surprise. "He's sacrificing the shooting," Mara said quietly, "to preserve the larger defense." The realization chilled Elena. The gunshot that had launched everything might become collateral damage in a broader game. That night, Daniel called again. "You see?" he said, voice almost gentle. "You underestimate me." "You shot yourself," she replied. "I survived." "That's your metric?" "It's the only one that matters." She hesitated before asking, "Why tell the public now?" "Because secrets are liabilities," he said. "If they're going to question it, better I initiate." You initiated a crime. I initiated a narrative. And you think that's different. It is. She felt exhaustion settle into her bones. Do you feel anything? She asked quietly. For you? He clarified. For anyone. There was a long silence. I feel pressure, he said finally. And I feel opportunity. Not guilt? Guilt is unproductive. The detachment in his voice cut deeper than accusation. Daniel, she said slowly. What would it take for you to stop? Stop what? This. He exhaled softly. Elena, this is who I am. The simplicity of it was devastating. The investigation intensified. Forensic teams revisited the house. Analysts examined financial flows with increased urgency. Daniel's accounts faced preliminary freezes. His attorneys grew more aggressive in public statements. Elena gave formal testimony regarding the contingency documents, detailing the fabricated emails and asset transfers. She endured cross-examination from Daniel's legal team, who painted her as emotionally volatile and vindictive. Isn't it true you accessed Mr. Ray's computer without permission? One attorney pressed. Yes, she replied. And you admit to copying confidential data? Yes. So, you violated his privacy. I prevented him from destroying evidence, she said evenly. The courtroom murmured. You're not a forensic expert, the attorney said sharply. No, she agreed. I'm someone he planned to blame. The judge called for order. After the session, Mara caught up with her in the hallway. He's cornered, she said. Asset freezes are expanding. He'll find another move, Elena replied automatically. Maybe, Mara conceded. But the margin is shrinking. That evening, Elena returned to the borrowed apartment alone. The silence felt heavier than any crowd. She stood by the window, staring at the city lights, and allowed herself a moment of unfiltered grief, not for the engagement, not for the house, for the realization that the man she had loved had never seen her as anything but variable. Her phone buzzed. Daniel. She considered letting it go to voicemail. Instead, she answered. You look tired, he said. You sound calm. I am. Why? Because this phase is ending. Her heart thudded. What does that mean? It means I've secured what I need. A chill ran through her. Secured what? Leverage. Against who? You're not getting out of this cleanly, she said. I don't need clean, he replied. I need viable. And if viability means dragging me down further? A pause. I already did, he said quietly. Her stomach tightened. What did you do? I released communications between you and Mara, he said. Selective ones. They suggest coordination before the shooting. Her breath caught. You manipulated timestamps. I curated context. That's fraud. That's strategy. The implications cascaded instantly. If those communications were framed as premeditated sabotage, her admission of accessing his files could be construed as conspiracy. You're escalating beyond financial crime, she whispered. You escalated first, he replied. No, she said. You pulled the trigger. Silence again, heavier this time. You think this is about right and wrong, he said finally. It's about endurance. And what happens when endurance runs out? It won't. She felt the old fear returning, not of violence, but of his refusal to recognize limits. Daniel, she said slowly, if you continue like this, you'll burn every bridge. I build new ones. With what? With the same thing I always use, he replied. Control. The call ended. Elena sank into a chair, pulse racing. Within minutes, news alerts began referencing leaked messages between her and an internal source, suggesting she had been in contact before the shooting. Commentators speculated whether the attack had been orchestrated to manipulate markets. Mara called immediately. He altered timestamps, she said. But we can challenge that. How long will that take? Too long for public opinion. Elena closed her eyes. The war had moved beyond evidence into perception. Do you regret it? Mara asked suddenly. Regret what? Not running with him. Elena considered the question carefully. No, she said. I regret believing he would ever choose me. The next court session was more brutal. Daniel's team presented the altered communications, implying collusion. Elena's attorney objected, citing forensic inconsistencies. But the damage was done. Headlines framed the case as a toxic partnership turned mutual sabotage. Outside the courthouse, a reporter shouted, Miss Alvarez, did you and Mr. Reyes stage the shooting together? She did not answer. That night, Daniel appeared in a televised interview, composed as ever. I trusted someone I loved, he said gravely. That trust was misplaced. Elena watched from the apartment, a strange calm settling over her. The war had consumed the engagement, the house, the shared future. What remained was a stark clarity. Her phone buzzed one last time that evening. Daniel, you could have been safe, he said. Safe isn't the same as free, she replied. And this is freedom? No, she said. This is consequence. He was quiet for a moment. You still don't understand, he said softly. Then explain. Survival is the only truth, he replied. She looked out at the city lights, at the endless grid of windows concealing private wars. Do I? Then maybe we deserve what survives, she said. He did not respond. The line went dead, leaving only the hum of the city and the knowledge that the next move, whoever made it, would not restore what had already been destroyed. The following morning, the market reacted before the courts did. Daniel's firm's stock plummeted, rebounded, then dropped again as analysts argued over the authenticity of the leaked communications. Panels debated whether Elena was a whistleblower or an accomplice. Every minute that passed without clarity widened the fracture. Mara arrived at the apartment before dawn, eyes rimmed with fatigue but mind alert. Forensics confirmed manipulation, she said immediately. The timestamps were altered. We can prove it. How long until that's public? Elena asked. Hours, Mara replied. But hours are dangerous. Elena nodded slowly. She had begun measuring time not in days but in damage. There's something else, Mara continued. Daniel's attorneys filed a motion claiming prosecutorial misconduct. They're arguing the investigation was tainted by personal vendetta. Against me? Against both of us, Mara corrected. He's trying to discredit the entire process. Of course he was. If he could not win on facts, he would attack structure. Elena stood and moved to the window. The city below looked indifferent, as if none of this existed beyond screens and headlines. What does he want now? She asked. To destabilize everything, Mara said. If the investigation collapses procedurally, he walks. And, if it doesn't, he fights until he finds leverage. Elena let that settle. Leverage. It was always about leverage. Her phone vibrated again. Daniel. She showed the screen to Mara. Mara hesitated, then nodded. Take it, she said. But speaker. Elena answered and set the phone on the table. You're predictable, Daniel said. His voice filtered through distance but still composed. I knew you'd stay with her. You know me so well, Elena replied evenly. I do, he said. You always choose principle over protection, and you always choose protection over people. A faint exhale, almost amusement. Still framing it that way. What do you want? She asked. I want to end this phase, he replied. It's inefficient. You mean it's slipping? I mean it's escalating beyond optimal thresholds. Mara's jaw tightened at the clinical language. You altered timestamps, Elena said. Selective release, Daniel corrected. Forensics caught it. I expected they would. Elena blinked. You expected it? Yes, he said calmly. Which means the exposure of the manipulation is also part of the arc. Her stomach dropped. You're layering deceptions. I'm controlling pacing, he replied. Mara leaned forward. You're admitting intentional interference in an investigation, she said sharply. Daniel paused. Ah, she's there. Yes, Elena said. We're done hiding. Good, Daniel replied. Then you both understand this. The more you push, the more I escalate. Escalate how? Elena demanded. He was quiet for a beat too long. There are financial structures you haven't seen, he said softly. Transactions that implicate more than me. The implication was clear. You'll drag others down, Mara said. I'll protect myself, Daniel answered. And if that protection exposes crimes beyond your own? Elena asked. That's collateral. The word made Mara flinch. Daniel, Elena said slowly. This stops being strategy and becomes destruction. It always was, he replied. The call ended again, without ceremony. Silence filled the room. He's threatening systemic fallout, Mara said finally. If he releases those structures, regulators will have to widen the net. Which delays everything, Elena said, and increases chaos. Elena closed her eyes. He was not just fighting for freedom. He was willing to destabilize markets, implicate colleagues, perhaps even destabilize entire departments to preserve himself. He won't stop, she whispered. No, Mara agreed, but he's running out of space. By afternoon, forensic confirmation of the altered timestamps became public. Commentators shifted tone, questioning Daniel's credibility more aggressively. The narrative that Elena had orchestrated a coordinated sabotage weakened under technical scrutiny, yet the damage lingered. Trust once fractured does not return simply because data vindicates. Elena agreed to another formal statement, this time directly addressing the manipulated communications. She stood before cameras, aware that every word would be dissected. I accessed those files because I believed I was being set up, she said calmly. Subsequent evidence shows that communications used to implicate me were altered. I am cooperating fully. A reporter shouted. Did you and Mr. Reyes stage the shooting together? No, she replied. He staged it alone. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Can you prove that? I can prove trajectory inconsistencies, she said. And motive. And what was the motive? Sympathy, she answered. The word felt thin compared to the scale of damage. That evening, Daniel did not call. Instead, an official statement from his legal team condemned Elena's claims as defamatory and emotionally motivated. They announced a countersuit for reputational damage. Mara slammed her phone down. He's doubling down. He has nothing else, Elena said quietly. You underestimate his reserves. Maybe, Elena conceded. But he's losing control. As if to test that theory, Daniel appeared on television again, this time without lawyers flanking him. His tone was different, less measured, more direct. I will not allow personal vendettas to distort the truth, he said. I have made mistakes, but I will not accept fabricated narratives. Elena studied his face carefully. There was a tightness around his eyes she had not seen before. Fatigue. Pressure. He's feeling it, she murmured. Mara nodded. Pressure makes people reckless. Or honest, Elena said. Daniel doesn't do honest. Later that night, Elena sat alone in the apartment, replaying his interviews in her mind. She remembered the early days of their relationship, how he would stay up late explaining market structures and risk management, his eyes alight with ambition. She had admired that clarity. She had mistaken it for integrity. Her phone vibrated again. Daniel. She hesitated longer this time before answering. You look tired, he said, echoing her earlier observation. So do you, she replied. I miscalculated you, he said abruptly. She froze. In what way? I assumed fear would anchor you. It almost did. But you pivoted, he said. That was unexpected. You taught me. A faint, humorless laugh. Perhaps I did. Silence lingered, but it felt different now, less combative, more exposed. You're cornered, she said quietly. I'm pressured, he corrected. And what happens when pressure exceeds adaptation? He did not answer immediately. I have an offer, he said finally. She felt her pulse quicken. What kind of offer? I cooperate, he said. Limited, controlled. I concede to certain charges, mitigate exposure, protect broader structures. And me? She asked. You withdraw public statements regarding the shooting. She inhaled sharply. You want me to lie. I want you to de-escalate. You staged it. I survived it. That's not the same. It is in court, he replied. She felt anger surge, but beneath it was something else. Weariness. If I withdraw, she said slowly. What do you admit? Financial irregularities, he said. Nothing violent, nothing theatrical. You think the shooting was theatrical. It was strategic. She closed her eyes briefly. You're bargaining with reality. I'm bargaining with outcomes. And if I refuse? He exhaled softly. Then we both bleed longer. The phrase hung heavy. Elena, he continued, and for the first time his voice lost some of its steel. This doesn't have to annihilate us. It already did, she replied. Another pause. You loved me, he said. I did. And now? She considered the question carefully. Now I see you. Silence again. I never wanted to hurt you, he said quietly. You never wanted to lose, she corrected. He did not deny it. Think about the offer, he said. It's the cleanest exit available. The call ended. Elena sat in the dim light, heart pounding. A negotiated end. Controlled admissions. A retreat from the most damning claim. It would shorten the war. It would reduce exposure. It would also erase the truth of the bullet. Mara arrived shortly after midnight, summoned by a brief message. He offered a deal. She listened as Elena outlined the proposal. He wants you to retract the shooting accusation, Mara said slowly, in exchange for partial cooperation. And you? I don't know. Mara studied her carefully. If he admits financial crimes, he'll still face charges. Reduced perhaps, but real. But the shooting becomes ambiguous, Elena said. A misunderstanding. And that matters to you. Yes. Why? Elena struggled to articulate it. Because that was the moment I realized he'd use anything, even violence, to control perception. If I let that fade, it becomes myth. Mara nodded slowly. Then don't let it fade. But if I refuse, he escalates. He's already escalated. Elena stood and paced. He's offering a shorter war. At the cost of truth. Yes. And what do you want? Mara asked. Elena stopped moving. The question felt heavier than any legal risk. I want it to end, she said finally. But not like that. Mara nodded once. Then you already know your answer. The next day, Elena called Daniel back. I won't retract, she said before he could speak. Silence on the other end. Then you choose prolongation, he replied evenly. I choose accuracy. You're stubborn. You're dangerous. A faint exhale. So this continues. Yes. There was no anger in either voice now. Only recognition. Then understand this, he said quietly. If I fall completely, I won't fall alone. I know, she replied. The line disconnected. Within hours, new financial documents surfaced, complex structures implicating additional executives. Investigators widened their scope. Markets reacted violently. Mara stared at the data with a mixture of awe and dread. He just detonated half the sector. He warned us, Elena said softly. Now regulators have to pursue everything. And he buys time. Yes. The war had expanded beyond personal betrayal into institutional crisis. The pressure Daniel promised had become tangible. That evening, federal authorities executed coordinated warrants across multiple offices. Daniel was taken into custody for questioning under expanded charges. Cameras captured him entering the building, expression composed but eyes darker than before. Elena watched from the apartment, breath tight in her chest. This was not resolution. It was escalation made visible. Her phone remained silent. Hours later, Mara received confirmation. Formal charges filed. Financial fraud, obstruction of justice, evidence manipulation. Elena, Mara said softly, it's moving. Elena nodded, though movement did not feel like relief. It felt like acceleration towards something irreversible. Near midnight, her phone finally buzzed. Unknown number. She answered cautiously. It's me, Daniel said. You're in custody, she replied. Temporary, he said. There was background noise, murmurs, metallic echoes. You're facing expanded charges, she said. I anticipated that. Did you? Yes. Silence stretched. Elena, he said quietly. This isn't over. I know. I won't break. I know. Another pause. Will you? He asked. She stared at the darkened window, at her own reflection superimposed over the city lights. No, she said. The line clicked off. She remained standing there long after, aware that what came next would not be negotiation or performance, but endurance, measured in months, perhaps years. The next morning did not arrive with clarity. It arrived with legal briefs, market fallout, and a headline cycle that had learned to pronounce her name correctly. Daniel's arraignment was scheduled for early afternoon, and the federal building was already surrounded by cameras before sunrise. Elena watched the live coverage without sound, studying his posture as marshals escorted him inside. He did not look defeated. He looked contained. Mara arrived with coffee and a stack of printed filings. They're stacking obstruction with financial fraud, she said, dropping the papers on the table. The manipulated timestamps strengthened the obstruction charge. Elena nodded slowly. He knew that. He calculated it, Mara corrected. Why escalate if he knew it would increase exposure? Mara hesitated. Because expanding the case widens responsibility. The more people implicated, the harder it is to isolate him. Mutual destruction, Elena murmured. Yes, the arraignment was procedural, but symbolic. Daniel entered a not guilty plea. His attorneys argued that the evidence was circumstantial and politically motivated. Prosecutors outlined the breadth of financial irregularities and the alleged manipulation of evidence, including the staged shooting. When the judge denied immediate bail pending further review, a subtle shift rippled through the room. Daniel's expression flickered, barely perceptible, but Elena saw it. It was not fear, it was recalibration. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed again. Elena did not attend in person. Instead, she issued a written statement through her attorney, affirming her cooperation and reiterating her claim regarding the shooting. It was measured, clinical, devoid of emotional language. She refused to let the narrative frame her as reactive. That night, Daniel called from a recorded detention line. They're holding me, he said, voice echoing faintly. For now, she replied. You sound composed. So do you. A faint breath that might have been a laugh. Composure is currency. You're running out of it. Not yet. Silence settled, but it was not the sharp silence of accusation. It was heavier, almost reflective. You could still withdraw the shooting claim, he said quietly. It complicates sentencing, and you could still admit it, she countered. Another pause. You think that would satisfy you? He asked. It would be honest. Honesty doesn't reduce prison time. It reduces distortion. He did not respond immediately. When he did, his tone shifted slightly. You're still trying to correct me. I'm trying to stop you. You can't. I already did. The line crackled. Elena, he said softly, if I go down fully, you'll carry this too. I already am. Not like that. What does that mean? He hesitated, and for the first time since this began, she sensed uncertainty rather than strategy. There are transactions tied to shared accounts, he said. Wedding deposits, property transfers. They'll scrutinize everything. I know. They may charge you. I know. The admission hung between them. You're willing to risk indictment, he said quietly. I'm willing to risk consequence, she replied. Another silence. Why? He asked. The question felt different now, not rhetorical, not manipulative, but genuinely probing. Because I refuse to live as your contingency, she said. The words settled with finality. The call ended shortly after, not in anger, but in something closer to exhaustion. Over the next week, prosecutors moved aggressively. They secured cooperation from 2 mid-level executives implicated in the widened financial structures. In exchange for reduced sentences, those executives provided detailed testimony about directives originating from Daniel's office. Mara relayed the updates in fragments. He's still not folding, she said. But the wall is closing. Elena listened without triumph. Each new witness tightened the legal noose, but it also expanded the human wreckage. Careers imploded. Families were dragged into public scrutiny. Markets remained volatile. One evening, as Elena reviewed documents with her attorney, a new development surfaced. An internal memo from Daniel's firm, dated weeks before the shooting, outlined a crisis leverage scenario. It included projections for public sympathy, impact, and legal positioning following a controlled incident. Elena read the phrase twice. Controlled incident. The memo did not explicitly reference the shooting, but the timing aligned. The language mirrored Daniel's strategic vocabulary. This is significant, her attorney said quietly. It proves intent, Elena replied. It proves premeditation of narrative management, he corrected, which strengthens the obstruction case. And the shooting? It supports your claim. The next hearing focused partially on this memo. Prosecutors introduced it to demonstrate pattern and intent. Daniel's attorneys objected, arguing speculative interpretation. The judge allowed it into evidence. Daniel's gaze scanned the courtroom until it landed on Elena. For a moment, everything else receded. His eyes did not accuse. They assessed. After the session, as she exited the courthouse, a reporter shouted, "Miss Alvarez, do you feel vindicated?" She paused briefly. "No," she said. "I feel accountable." The word surprised even her. That night, Daniel called again. "They found the memo," he said. "Yes. You understand it was theoretical. It aligned with execution. Correlation is not causation. Pattern is not coincidence," she replied. He was quiet for a long moment. "You're very certain," he said. "I'm very tired," she corrected. A faint exhale. "They're offering me a plea," he said abruptly. Her heart tightened. "For what?" "Reduced sentence in exchange for full cooperation. And they want admission of obstruction and financial fraud. No explicit violent charges. And the shooting? Folded into obstruction," he said. "Not separate." She processed that. "You'd admit manipulation," she said slowly. "Yes, but not staging. Not explicitly." Silence settled again. "You're negotiating semantics," she said. "I'm negotiating years. And what happens to the truth? The truth becomes implied." She felt frustration surge. "That's not the same. It's close enough legally, but not morally. Moral clarity doesn't reduce prison time," he repeated. "And prison time doesn't erase what you did." He did not argue that. "Elena," he said quietly, "if I take this plea, the escalation stops, the sector stabilizes, the investigation narrows, and you serve time." "Yes." The simplicity startled her. "And you're considering it," she said. "I'm evaluating viability." There it was again, viability. "And if you refuse?" she asked. "Then this continues for years, trials, appeals, more fallout." She closed her eyes briefly. "You're asking me what?" she said. "Nothing," he replied. "I'm informing you." "Why?" Another pause. "Because you're still part of the equation," he said. The statement felt less tactical than it once would have. "You never answered me," she said softly. "About what?" "If you ever felt guilt." Silence lingered longer this time. "I feel pressure," he said finally. "And I feel miscalculation." "That's not guilt." "No," he agreed. The call ended without resolution. Over the next days, speculation about a potential plea deal dominated coverage. Analysts debated sentencing guidelines and the strength of evidence. Some argued Daniel would never concede. Others suggested strategic admission would preserve future prospects. Elena moved through it all with a strange detachment. Her own legal exposure remained under review, but prosecutors signaled that her cooperation mitigated potential charges. Still, the possibility hovered. One afternoon, she received a notice. She was required to appear for formal deposition regarding shared financial accounts. The weight of it settled heavily. Cooperation did not absolve participation. In the deposition room, questions were precise and relentless. Wedding payments, property down payments, transfers between joint accounts. She answered honestly, even when honesty revealed negligence. Did you question the origin of these funds? An attorney asked. No, she admitted. Why not? Because I trusted him. And that trust absolves you? No, she said quietly. It implicates me. The admission hung in the sterile room. When she left the building, Mara was waiting. How bad? Mara asked. I wasn't careful enough, Elena replied. Mara nodded. Most people aren't when they believe they're safe. The phrase lingered. That evening, Daniel called again. I heard about your deposition, he said. They told you? I have counsel, he replied. They're scrutinizing joint accounts. I expected that. You could have insulated me, she said. I tried, he replied. With false identities? With distance. She exhaled slowly. Distance would have meant honesty. Honesty would have meant vulnerability. Yes. He did not respond. Elena, he said after a moment, if I take the plea, you'll likely avoid charges. And if you don't, then prosecutors may pursue leverage through you. The implication was clear. You're still calculating, she said. I always will. And if calculation costs you everything, he paused. Then it was still survival, he said. The hearing to formalize plea discussions was scheduled for the following week. Media coverage intensified, framing it as the climax of a financial scandal that had expanded beyond personal betrayal into institutional reckoning. On the morning of the hearing, Elena sat in the gallery, hands folded tightly in her lap. Daniel entered in a suit that no longer carried the aura of control but retained composure. When their eyes met briefly, neither looked away. The prosecutor outlined the proposed plea framework: admission of obstruction of justice, admission of significant financial fraud, cooperation in broader investigation, sentencing recommendation, pending compliance. The judge asked Daniel directly, "Do you understand the terms?" "I do," he replied. "Do you accept responsibility for the charges as outlined?" A silence stretched across the courtroom. Elena felt her breath catch. Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. "I accept responsibility for the actions described," he said finally. The phrasing was deliberate. It admitted conduct without indulging detail. "And do you understand the consequences?" the judge asked. "Yes." The hearing adjourned pending finalization. Outside, reporters declared it a turning point. Inside, Elena felt neither relief nor triumph. It was not an ending. It was a contraction. That night, Daniel called again. "It's done," he said. "Not yet," she replied. "Close enough." Silence hovered. "You admitted it," she said quietly. "I admitted viability." "And the shooting?" "Folded. Not confessed. Integrated." She almost laughed at the language. "Does it matter to you?" she asked. "Yes," he said unexpectedly. She froze. "Why?" she whispered. "Because you needed it," he replied. The answer unsettled her more than denial would have. "You think this is about me," she said. "It's about outcomes," he corrected. "And what outcome do you expect now?" "Containment," he said. "Reduction. Survival." "And after that?" He was quiet. "There is no after that yet," he said. The line clicked off. Elena remained seated long after the call ended, aware that while a plea might narrow the legal battlefield, the emotional terrain remained fractured and unresolved. The official plea agreement was finalized 3 days later. Daniel stood before the court and entered a formal guilty plea to obstruction of justice and multiple counts of financial fraud. The language was sterile, procedural, stripped of drama. It acknowledged manipulation of evidence, intentional misrepresentation of financial structures, and strategic concealment of investigative material. It did not describe the bullet. It did not say he had aimed at his own shoulder. Elena listened to every word as if listening for a confession hidden between syllables. It never came. When the judge asked, "Did you knowingly manipulate evidence to influence the course of an investigation?" Daniel answered clearly. "Yes." The courtroom shifted slightly at that. When asked, "Did you knowingly engage in fraudulent financial activities for personal and institutional gain?" He answered, "Yes." The word felt heavier than any denial he had ever offered. Sentencing was scheduled for several months later, contingent on full cooperation. Daniel would remain in federal custody. Outside the courthouse, microphones surged again. Elena did not speak. Mara issued a brief statement praising the legal process and acknowledging the gravity of the admitted misconduct. The media cycle framed it as accountability. But accountability was not absolution. That night, Daniel called from detention. "It's procedural now," he said. "Yes," she replied. "You heard it." "I did." And it wasn't everything." He was silent for a moment. "It was enough legally," he said. "Not for me." A faint exhale. "Elena, I can't rewrite it the way you want." "You could have said it." "Said what?" "That you staged it." Silence lingered longer this time. "That was embedded," he said finally. "Embedded isn't explicit. Explicit increases exposure. You're already convicted." "I'm contained," he corrected. "And that matters more than truth." "It always has," he said. She felt the old frustration rise, but it was quieter now, more tired than sharp. "Do you feel anything different?" she asked. "Different how?" "Now that it's formal." He paused. "I feel reduced," he said. The word surprised her. "Reduced to what?" "Numbers, counts, guidelines." "You built everything on numbers," she replied. "I know." Silence again. "Do you regret it?" she asked. Another long pause. "I regret miscalculating scope," he said. "That's not the same as regret." "No," he agreed. The line hummed faintly. "Elena," he said quietly, "are you going to testify at sentencing?" "Yes." "For or against?" "For context," she replied. He absorbed that. "Context can be sharp," he said. "So can silence." The call ended. The months leading up to sentencing felt less explosive but more corrosive. Without daily headline shocks, the reality of consequence settled in slower and heavier. Daniel's cooperation with federal investigators resulted in additional indictments across the widened financial network. Executives he had once described as allies now appeared in separate courtrooms, negotiating their own survival. Mara worked tirelessly, navigating the expanding web of testimony and documentation. Elena resumed part-time consulting work, attempting to reconstruct a life that no longer revolved around crisis management. Yet, the scandal shadowed everything. Every professional introduction carried a flicker of recognition. One afternoon, Elena received official notice that she would not face criminal charges. Prosecutors cited substantial cooperation and lack of direct financial gain. The relief was muted. Avoiding indictment did not erase complicity. She called Daniel that evening. "They're not charging me," she said. "I expected that," he replied. "Why?" "Because you were peripheral." The word stung. "Peripheral," she repeated. "Yes. I was central enough to frame. That was contingency. Which makes me peripheral." Silence. "You want to redefine it," she said. "I want to clarify." "You used me." "I leveraged proximity," he said. "And now?" "Now you're outside the structure." The phrasing felt like an architectural metaphor, as if their relationship had been a building now partially demolished. "Do you feel alone?" she asked suddenly. "In here," he replied. "Everyone is alone." "That's not what I meant." "I know." He did not elaborate. Sentencing day arrived under gray skies. The courtroom was less crowded than during the plea hearing, but tension still hung in the air. Daniel entered in standard detention attire, stripped of tailored suits and polished presentation. He looked thinner. His posture remained upright. The prosecutor outlined the scope of fraud and obstruction, emphasizing the calculated manipulation of evidence. When it was Elena's turn to speak, she approached the podium with steady steps. She did not attack. She did not dramatize. "I trusted him," she said. "That trust made me inattentive. It made me vulnerable to manipulation. The financial misconduct harmed institutions and people who relied on integrity. The evidence manipulation harmed the concept of accountability. I am not here for revenge. I am here because acknowledgement matters." The courtroom was silent. "I do not need him to confess every detail," she continued. "I need the system to recognize the pattern." She stepped back. Daniel's eyes remained on her as she returned to her seat. There was no visible anger, no visible remorse, only assessment. The judge delivered the sentence. A substantial federal term, reduced slightly due to cooperation, followed by supervised release and financial restitution orders. The numbers were specific, unforgiving. When it was done, Daniel was led away without looking back immediately. Only at the doorway did he turn his head slightly. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second before he disappeared behind the security door. Outside, the media declared closure. There was no closure. In the weeks that followed, the pace of news slowed. Other scandals emerged. Markets stabilized. The widened investigation continued quietly. Daniel's cooperation yielded further indictments, but his name receded from headlines. Elena tried to reconstruct routine. She moved into a smaller apartment with no boarded windows and no hidden safes. She resumed professional work cautiously. Therapy became a regular fixture in her schedule, a space where she could unpack the layers of manipulation without cameras. Yet Daniel continued to call. Not daily, not even weekly, but periodically. The conversations shifted in tone. They were less combative, more abstract. "In here," he said during one call, "time is elastic." "How so?" she asked. "Days compress, decisions expand." "That sounds almost reflective." "It's analytical," he corrected. "Of course." He described prison routines with clinical detail, meal schedules, work assignments, the hierarchy of influence among inmates. He observed patterns even there. "You're still studying structures," she said. "It's instinct," he replied. "And what do you learn?" "That control is relative," he said. The phrase lingered. "Do you feel less powerful?" she asked. "Power was always contextual," he said. "Now the context is different." "And you?" "I'm adapting." She exhaled softly. "Of course you are." One evening, months into his sentence, he asked a question he had not asked before. "Do you hate me?" he said. She was quiet for a long moment. "No," she said finally. "Why not?" "Because hate keeps me tethered." "Then what do you feel?" She considered the question carefully. "Clarity," she said. He absorbed that. "And about us?" he asked. "There is no us," she replied gently. Silence settled, but it was not sharp. "I never planned to hurt you," he said again, echoing an earlier claim. "I know," she replied. "You don't believe me." "I believe you didn't prioritize it." Another pause. "That's accurate," he said. The admission felt less strategic now, more resigned. Over time, the calls grew less frequent. Daniel remained analytical, still framing experiences in terms of leverage and adaptation. But there were moments brief, almost accidental, when his language softened. One afternoon, he said quietly, "I replay that night sometimes." "The shooting," she said. "Yes. And I underestimated the ripple," he replied. She waited. "I thought it would be contained," he continued. "I misjudged you." "That wasn't about me," she said. "It was about control." "Control includes variables," he replied. She almost smiled at the phrasing. "And now," she asked, "what do you control?" "My responses," he said after a pause. It was the closest he had come to introspection. Years would pass before his release. The legal chapter had narrowed but not erased the emotional aftermath. Elena moved forward cautiously, aware of patterns she had once ignored. She rebuilt trust slowly, in professional circles and in personal boundaries. One evening, long after headlines had faded, her phone rang again. "Daniel." His voice sounded older, less sharp. "They're transferring me," he said. "Where?" "Lower security." "Is that good?" "It's progression," he replied. Silence hovered. "I read an article about you," he said. "What article?" "Your work on ethical oversight." She had published a piece months earlier, analyzing systemic vulnerabilities that allowed strategic manipulation. "You read it," she said. "I had access. And it was precise." "That's your compliment." "Yes." She exhaled softly. "Do you see yourself in it?" she asked. "I see patterns I exploited," he replied. And structures that enabled me." She waited. "And people who trusted me," he added quietly. The addition hung there. "That's closer," she said. "Closer to what?" "To acknowledgement." Silence lingered. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said. "I'm not offering it," she replied. "That's fair." The call ended without drama. Elena stood by the window of her apartment, looking out at the city that had once amplified their collapse. The war had narrowed into memory, but the consequences remained embedded in court records, in financial systems, in her own sense of discernment. The narrative had not ended cleanly. It had contracted, reshaped, left fractures that would not fully disappear. And somewhere within federal walls, Daniel continued adapting to a context he no longer controlled.